Hey, Raj, thank you so much. Such a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much. How have you been?
Gaurav, I've been great. It's great to be here with you. I'm excited to do this with you.
Absolutely. The day I picked up your book on digital seekers, that day I decided that I have to speak to you and I have to invite you on the show, the X Monks Drive. And so here you
Thank,
are.
thank you. Yes, no, very excited about the book, The Digital Seeker, and I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you. Raj, very curious. What I know is that you started your entrepreneurship journey at an age of 22. And I will definitely talk about that. But before that, I would love to understand from you if you may share a couple of episodes from your life which have
Sure.
shaped you become who you are today.
Yeah, I will. I mean, I will go back to kind of how I was raised and where I was raised. I was raised for the most part in the Philippines, and so I lived about 60 kilometers or 40 miles outside of Manila in a small town. And I would usually spend 9 months a year in the Philippines and 3 months in India. And so I was always this sort of international citizen of the world, not fully fitting into any one place, but on the other hand, with great affection for everywhere. And I think that helped me as I later would spend my career being very comfortable going to Europe, coming to the US, and many other parts of the world and doing business in many countries. It just had this international, sort of perspective. So that definitely shaped me in many ways. And then really the backgrounds of my parents, who had very unique backgrounds. So my father is a very well-known agricultural scientist and one of the fathers of the Green Revolution. You know,
Wow.
an inventor of many of the core scientific achievements that led to the varieties of rice that grow throughout India, throughout Asia, were really the result of his research. And he was and is an extraordinarily passionate, extraordinarily driven individual who fundamentally believed that it does not matter what you do. It only matters that you put 150% into it and that you be the best you can be at that. And that drive, I think very much came from him. And my mother is equally or more accomplished. She was a well-known actress and dancer, Bharatanatyam dancer. She was quite a famous actress in the 1960s in Tamil and Telugu movies. Um, she gave up that film career to get married and then moved to the Philippines from Chennai. And what's even more amazing than her many accomplishments in the arts is that at the time when she got married, she did not even have a high school degree because she had given up education for dance and films at the age of about 15. And so I remember my entire childhood was co-studying with my mother. And today she has two master's degrees,
Wow.
many years later. And so she just has always had this insatiable curiosity for learning that has driven her, throughout her life. And so, those are the experiences that I think molded me into who I am today.
Wow. So, you know, doing what you really care for, it's in your genes. And learning and relearning and continue to be on that path, that's very much in your genes.
That's right. When people say, okay, you learn early on in your life and then, sort of cap out there. My mother in her late 70s learns more every day than I learn today. So, that kind of role model is there and just, yes, the passion, the focus, the desire to learn, the desire to get better and the desire to have impact as a whole is core to who I am.
Thank you for sharing, Raj. I mean, it helped me to look into where is Raj coming from. So, thank you. Raj, you started your entrepreneurship journey at an age of 22. I mean, were you clear about that you wanted to get into entrepreneurship? Did it just happen to you? Very curious to know.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I could spell entrepreneurship at 22. It was so far afield from what I had been an electrical engineer at Princeton. I had worked in a research lab. I had studied public policy. I knew nothing about business really, and I found myself after a short stint as a researcher, as a engineer I decided to spend 2 years on Wall Street. And how I became an entrepreneur is 100% accidental. I was working at a Wall Street firm in New York. I'd completed 2 years. I decided I would go back to school, go back to business school and get a graduate degree. Had received admission from Harvard at that time, accepted admission to go. And it was about May of that year, I remember it well. And really my boss's boss was saying, hey, I'm looking at potentially making an investment and starting a telecommunications company in Europe. Raj, since you have the summer before you start school, can you help me put together this business plan? And I said, sure. So I started to get into it. And then I should have known better, but I got so passionate about what that project was about that by the time August came around, it was becoming real. The idea was to actually start a telecommunications business in Europe. I was living in New York. My investors and co-founders were living in New York as well and had families. So they said, we cannot move to Europe. Raj, would you be interested in moving to Europe and setting up this business? And I had literally never been to Europe before until that point.
At the age of 22, you had this opportunity.
I had this opportunity.
And you were processing this information.
I was processing this information. I had spent the summer working on this business plan, and I just could not leave it. I could not imagine leaving it and going back to school. So I tried to get a deferral from Harvard to say, hey, I'll come back in 2 years or 1 year. And they said no. So then I was faced with the choice. Do I turn down the admission and continue this and do this crazy entrepreneurial project? Or do I go back to school? And you can imagine it would have been a popular choice with my parents and others who also had no business experience, by the way, given their backgrounds. They were like, why would you do this instead of going to Harvard? But I turned down the admission and picked up and moved to Europe, and the rest is history.
At least did you expect that one day you'll be running one of the biggest organizations in the world called bloomreach?
Not at all. I mean, at that moment, my concerns were far more narrow. Like, could I, was I giving up my green card opportunity in the U.S.? Was this just a kind of a throwaway career choice? What is it in the first place? What does it mean to be an entrepreneur? What does it mean to set up a business? I had no knowledge of how to do any of these things whatsoever. Not to mention doing it in countries. Originally, I moved to France to try to set it up, then eventually to London, and I had no knowledge of even the environment around me. So there were lots of unknowns at that time.
No, Raj, very curious. That is the age when an individual is struggling and dealing with the way I'm perceived in the society, and to get aligned to the societal ways of evaluating being successful or not so successful. And who would say no to Harvard for something which is so uncertain? Business, right. Geography, new domain, and then also you chose to go ahead and charter the uncharted territory. What was going on inside the mind of that 22-year-old boy, if I may call?
Yeah, so, a couple of things. The first is that it was in my heart, not in my mind. And it's what I believe most entrepreneurship really is. Entrepreneurship is not a rational pursuit. It cannot be. It is not about the stories of people who have had great success. The real question is, if you go through your life with low probability of success and therefore high probability of failure for many, many years, toiling away, giving up better choices, giving up better career opportunities. And if you knew that in advance, would you still do it? And very few people would. But if you cannot answer that question affirmatively, then you're certainly walking in irrationally into it, right? And so for me, I just loved what I was doing. Every day I loved getting up, trying to make stuff happen, trying to convince people, trying to learn new things, trying to explore new things. It was just such an exhilarating, unconstrained job, constrained only by ambition, energy, and thought process, that I could not imagine a better thing to get up every day and do. So first, it was in the heart. But then, like all of us, I think you have to find a way for the mind to meet the heart. Otherwise, you feel like you're really just making foolish choices. So I've come to embrace, what I think of as, I tell my own kids is sort of Raj's principle, which is very much really think about the worst case when you're really struggling with something and come to peace with how not so bad it really is. And so what I mean by that is, here I was a kid who had not grown up in the US. I grew up in India and the Philippines. I had had the good fortune of going to a great university in the US. I had had the good fortune of having my parents who at least were upper middle class or middle class and had enough means to so that I was not going to starve. So let's say this business was just an abject failure. And let's say I never went to Harvard. What was the worst thing that was going to happen? Maybe that business was viewed as a failure. So what? Maybe it would mean that I couldn't get another, that the first job that I got would not pay that much. So what? I didn't have any money anyway. So any money was good. What if it meant I didn't have a great apartment in New York City? Well, I had friends. I could call them and say, can I sleep on your couch? And I was fine with that. Let's say that none of that worked out and I didn't even get a green card and I was kicked out of the US. I had great family in India. I had great family in the Philippines. I could just move back to the countries I grew up in. What was so bad about that? So there was nothing the world could do to me that was all that bad.
So would it be okay for me to say that at that point in time, at an age of 22, rather than evaluating yourself based on the societal measures of success, you were very comfortable in your own skin and you were traveling light anyways, as you're saying?
100%. 100%. And I really believe this idea, and it's the curse. I would describe it as the curse of successful people. And when I say successful people, I mean people who have good education, people who have any means, people who have maybe had a good job, is that you feel like, oh my God, I might lose all of this. But when you let go of that burden and you say, so what if I lose all of this? And if you can think about the world in that way, the things you reach for become quite different.
Another question is coming to me because most of the entrepreneurs of today, they go for funding rather than starting something and building something from bootstrap.
That's right.
And the fear that they have there is, what if I lose something? And that's the reason they seek for funding.
Yeah, I think that's a deeper change in entrepreneurship, which is it's become a celebrity pursuit. But entrepreneurship is the task of creating something. That's what it is.
What is entrepreneurship for you then? How would you define
it? It is the pursuit of creating something great for the world. That's it. And so if you do not have passion for that creation and what you are creating, no amount of funding, no amount of skills, no amount of team members, no amount of boards, none of that matters.
What I'm listening is then, as per this definition, Raj, one is it has challenged me the way in the last 5 years I've seen entrepreneurship, and especially through the lens of startups. However, this thought has made me come closer to the way probably Martin Luther King has started his dream, the way Mahatma Gandhi would have started his movement, Nelson Mandela would have started his calling. And I think that's what you're talking about. It's a pursuit of creating something good for the world. Is my understanding right?
100% right. That has been my view. Now, I do not want to overstate the impact of any entrepreneur in comparison to some of the individuals you mentioned, because I think the sacrifices that they have made and the impact they have had is in another planet. But the emotion is the same.
Yeah.
The intent is the same, which is, you want to solve a problem for the world. Some might want to solve a problem that is about world peace, and others may want to solve problems that the rest of us try to solve. But it's about solving a problem for the world and creating something that does so.
Yeah, because the intention is same, right? It's the pursuit of creating something good for the world. On one hand, one is talking about bringing freedom and bringing peace in the world. The second one is talking about how can I help people access laptops at their home so that they can take informed decisions.
That's right. I believe that. I think at the core, you have to have the confidence and the hubris and the desire to believe you can do that. And the odds have to be against you. Entrepreneurship is about winning 100 battles to have the right to fight the war.
Mm, mm.
And any of those 100 battles that you lose, you lose.
And going back to your story, Raj, and now I'm getting more curious. How was the travel between your first entrepreneurship initiative that you had in the telecom sector with your boss's boss's boss and where you are today, where you are a
Absolutely.
serial entrepreneur?
At this point, I have been, an entrepreneur for 24 years in some form or another. So it is who I am. And, I look back on those early years of being an entrepreneur and I knew nothing, but I learned some very, very important things. And maybe the most important thing that I learned is how much I loved it. And what that meant is that I didn't have to be distracted for the rest of my life. And still I'm not today, which is, I find lots of people that I talk to who are still finding themselves in their early 20s, in their mid 20s, in their late 20s, in their early 30s, in their mid 30s. And I had the great fortune of stumbling upon a pursuit that I loved so much, independent of its outcome. And my first startup was not a glorious success by any means. So it's not like the success was the driver of continuing to pursue it. It was a moderate success, I would say, but it was extremely hard and a victim and beneficiary of crazy markets and the dot-com, boom and bust and everything in between. And many of the people that I worked with in that startup went back to more traditional pursuits after that. But I stayed on pursuing startups because I just loved the work. It was so exhilarating that I just, didn't ever want to do anything else. So I look back and I say, thank you for that experience, mostly because it helped me be clear and not distracted about what I wanted to do with my life.
So what difference do you see in Raj De Datta of 22 and Raj of today?
Today, yeah, I'm 46 years old, so it's been a long time. I think in many ways, many of those core attributes are the same: the stubbornness, the pursuit, the desire, the intensity. All those things are all the same. The curiosity. What's different, I think, is I know a lot more now, and so therefore, I'm just as prepared to make big bets, but I'm more thoughtful about those bets, to think through the downstream consequences of a choice, whatever those choices are. I am much more cognizant. At the time, I would say I thought entrepreneurship was about brilliant ideas. Now I realize entrepreneurship is much less about brilliant ideas and much more about persistence, the team around you, the culture and the environment, all of the other things that make those ideas have any shot of coming to fruition. I think at that time, I viewed it as something that was just fun. Now I actually do see the impact that it has on people, on the world, on so many aspects of our life. So my perspective has perhaps broadened a little bit, but a lot is the same. And I try hard to retain that because I think that youthful naivete and optimism, when you lose, you stop creating.
You lose life.
You lose life, you lose the desire to create.
Yeah. And if you look at the Raj of 22, barring the naiveness that you spoke about, the curiosity, the stubbornness that you spoke about, and the willingness and the grit with which you would continue and the persistence that you spoke about, what do you think? What's that one thing that you miss the most in the Raj of 22?
I think what I miss the most is the freedom that comes from lack of responsibility. In those days, I was the first person starting that venture. I recruited some friends. We traveled around Europe. We went here, we went there. We tried this, we tried that. There was just a serendipity to which much happened. And, I'm in a different position today, and I appreciate the position that I'm in today as well, but it's different. Now I'm responsible for quite a large company that powers billions of dollars of transactions around the world with great aspirations, huge amounts of investors who have bet behind. My responsibilities are much different. My actions and my words have much greater consequence than they ever did at that time. And if I miss something, I miss the freedom of not having those responsibilities at time.
At the same time, what you really enjoy is the kind of impact that you're able to create today.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's the same, again, not drawing analogies where they should not exist, but it's the same emotion that means that when you hear world leaders talk, they say, it's the best job ever to be president, to be prime minister, whatever it might be. But occasionally I wish I could walk to a Starbucks and not have somebody, notice who I am. Right? Both are true. You appreciate the honor and the responsibility, but at times you miss the freedom.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I cannot relate with that. But yeah, I know what you're talking about because having spoken to a few people who are at level where you are at, Raj, uh, I know what you're saying. So, Raj, very curious, you know, in today's world where the percentage of startups being successful is very bleak, what do you
Yes.
think is the number one reason that keeps the startups away from enjoying the sunshine?
Yeah, it's a tough question about what keeps the startups because as I believe that truly, 99 things have to go right to be successful, and any one that goes wrong makes you unsuccessful. That is the odds. Those odds don't change. But the odds to do highly impactful things have never been high in any pursuit. It doesn't matter if you're doing research in academics or you're trying to cure a disease that's difficult, or in my father's case, you're trying to bring rice to the world, or in my mother's case, if you're trying to be an accomplished dancer, the odds are always low to do something great, right? So what is the common element? It's a bit of a truism, but it comes back to it. To me, it's mostly about persistence,
Mm,
mostly about having the stamina and the grit and the to keep on going.
yeah, to keep on going.
And it's like I tell my kids, that does never give up. We just don't give up. And that sometimes it's smart to give up, by the way. There's a lot of that's not a virtue in many cases, but it is a requirement if you want to realize success.
And also, you mentioned about it's not about the idea, it's about the team that you have, it's about the culture that you have, it's about the way you execute. I'm just curious, and because last time I remember, Raj, you spoke about during our conversation that you've been able to attract good people around you. And I think that's one of the areas where most of the entrepreneurs struggle to
Yes.
find and retain good people around them.
Yes.
What's
Yes.
your trick? What's your hack around that?
I mean, my hack number one is that the mission behind what you're doing must cause somebody to get up every day without a lot of sleep and come to work with full energy. It has to be that powerful. Right? And not every day, and that's where the idea matters, because without a great idea, most people in the world are attracted certainly to other people, but they're also attracted to great missions that are worthy. Everybody wants to be inspired. And so putting the time and the energy into ensuring that you yourself are inspired and that you can articulate why you're inspired, that's the first magnet, I believe. The second magnet is the early people have to be great. It's very rare to find a company that finds great people much later. The seeds of great people start early because great people attract other great people and keep the bar incredibly high. So that I found was very important. And the third thing is the environment in which they operate has to be extraordinary as well. And I have, a playbook for culture that has worked for us for many years, and I believe very deeply in it. I think it is, there's lots of statements about, culture eats strategy for breakfast and all of these kinds of statements. And that's all true. But I
Yeah.
think unfortunately for most people, they hear that, they say that, but they don't really know what that means.
Yeah.
It's not real. But I have a very concrete playbook for culture that is very operational. And that I think has been a secret weapon as well.
Yeah. So picking up the conversation here and taking a look at bloomreach, tell me about what is the mission with which you started bloomreach, and what makes your organization's culture so attractive that people are willing to stay there and get up early in the morning and reach the office in time.
So, the mission of bloomreach is to create magical and measurable digital experiences for humanity. And what does that mean? What that means is it is my fundamental point of view that at this point, digital life and life are the same thing. And so just as we care very much about our interactions in our physical life, if all of our digital interactions were incredibly amazing, if every website, every app, every voice interaction or chat interaction were incredibly amazing, how much better would our life be? It would be much,
Very
much better.
smooth.
Exactly. So bloomreach is about building the platform that makes that possible for 7 billion people in the world. And that is our mission. And I believe it's certainly a top 5 mission in terms of impact on humanity, which is why I'm still doing it. Because I truly believe that if we can build the kind of platform that makes that possible, we will touch people, globally in ways that are very deep and very impactful. So I'm very inspired by that mission. And that's been a mission that we started the company with and continues to today. And then it's very much about, the right people, but then this cultural environment. And the culture, the root, we have our 5 values that matter, and you can see that on bloomreach.com. But I would say the underlying value behind the 5 values is about creating what I call a commitment culture. And a commitment culture is a culture that, in my mind, is the most powerful culture in the world. To use alternatives, you can have a culture that motivates through greed. You make more money if you do well. That is at its core about financial motivations. That's fine, nothing wrong with that. You can have a culture that's rooted in fear. And I've been there as well in certain Wall Street institutions where you're just afraid of your boss, you're afraid of losing your job, you're afraid somebody might call you out, and that's why you do what you do. That's a way of creating a culture. The culture of commitment is fundamentally the culture. It's the same culture that causes, kids to go to war together. I'm bound to my brother, I'm bound to my sister, I'm bound to my teammates, I'm bound to my customers, I'm bound to my investors, I'm bound to our mission. I'm so interlocked with it that commitment is what gets me up to go. So then you say, what creates a commitment culture? And every day the question is, every decision we make, every choice we make as a leadership team within bloomreach, does it increase the level of commitment of the team, or does it decrease the level of commitment of the team? And if asked that question, you can clearly figure out what the right answer is.
So every decision that you make should be in alignment to this value. So the value behind the value you mentioned. Wow. And how have you been able to cascade it down to the last person in the organization?
That's a great question as well. And there, the trick in my mind is about operationalizing culture. And so what that means is most companies run with a certain cadence. And the typical technology company, at least, runs with 2 major cadences in life. One is a financial sales cadence, and the other is a product cadence. The product cadence is about releases. I build software, I put a new version of my software out into the world. And that's what product and engineering teams work off of. The sales and financial is I have a certain target, I achieve certain financial numbers, revenue, EBITDA, whatever it might be. And I hit those numbers and I go forward. And companies run on these 2 cadences. Well, I think the missing link is a 3rd cadence, and it's a culture cadence. And it is a fundamental belief that the environment in which we operate is itself a product. And so if you were building a product, you would never say my product is done. You would always say, my product has to get better tomorrow than it is today. Well, the same thing is true culturally. So you might establish some values, as we have, you might establish some aspirations, but then you examine what is working and what is not working every quarter. And then every quarter you have a set of operational goals. Oh, we need to improve communication for remote work. Oh, we need to improve the level of transparency on these topics. These are small things, but you make them operational objectives every quarter because you're always trying to improve the culture and the environment. You're never just coming up with the values, giving some big speech and moving on. You're getting feedback, you're looking, you're examining, you have a strategy, you work towards it, and you do it every quarter, just like you have financial goals and profits.
Wow. And that is what you spoke about when you're talking about the playbook for culture?
Yes, that's one part of the playbook. It's a long playbook, but that is one part is to cascade, you have to make it operationally real. Great cultures are not created by how much
talking and speeching, by speeches. No.
Speeches. Those things matter, but they're a small part. Great cultures are created by the work environment that people actually experience.
And how you bring that in the day-to-day operations and what is being rewarded and what are we evaluating our culture on quarterly basis.
That's right. And if you have a people goal every quarter, you will structurally evolve your environment in a very positive way.
So Raj, help me understand. I'm sure in this journey of building where you are today, you would have come across several challenges and breakdowns. What's the biggest challenge that you have come across? And how did you manage to solve that?
The biggest business challenge or specifically related to culture?
Business challenge.
Oh, I've had so many business challenges that the list is very numerous, but I'll give you two stories. One is before I started my current business, bloomreach, I had what I would call my 2 years in the wilderness. And that was the period of time when my previous venture had been at Cisco. I was in Silicon Valley. It's a pretty good place to live. By then I had a wife and a daughter who was very young. And I really wanted to go start another business. And I kept thinking, okay, it won't take me very long. I'll go out. I have plenty of ideas here. I'll try this. It'll work. And for 2 years, I probably tried 10 ideas and none of them worked for a very long period of time. So it just kept going on and on and on. I would try idea number one. There was something would be wrong with that. Then something would be wrong with the next one. Sometimes it was team. Sometimes it was money. Sometimes it was ideas, whatever it might be. And so I kept failing fundamentally over those 2 years to get it off the ground. And of course, like most people, at some point I was thinking to myself, maybe I need to just go back and get a job and figure out what would happen and will I still be marketable? So I did a few things. The first thing I did is every 6 months or so, I would just go do some job interviews just to make sure I could still get a job. And then I would get the job and then turn it down and then continue my entrepreneurial. And that would just give me the confidence to say, you know what, I'm still marketable. If this all fails, it'll be okay. Yeah.
I still have some value in the market. If
I still have
nothing
some
else,
value.
as one of your favorite lines that I picked up, what's the worst that could happen?
Exactly. I could go get this job that I was going to get anyway. So that was helpful during that period. Of course, my family being incredibly supportive was helpful. My wife was working. She was like, keep at it. She had always known me to be an entrepreneur. So she knew I would not be very happy if I just checked into a regular job. So that was incredibly valuable. But the most important thing I did is I just kept trying. That's what I mean by the persistence. I just did not stop until it ultimately, kind of worked. So that's one story. And then on the other story, as it relates to bloomreach, bloomreach is now a 12-year-old company, but it looks like an overnight success today, but it wasn't always so. And in fact, about 5 or 6 years into the venture, it looked like it was going to be a complete wash, a complete disaster and a total failure. It looked like it had succeeded early, but our early products were no longer working and the business was going straight down. And it was an extraordinarily difficult time. And so I had a lot of choices. And some people said at that time, it was time to move on and go do different things. But I was just not willing to fail. And so I remember very clearly first calling my investors and telling them very clearly, look, your investment could be worth nothing. I just need to tell you that. Right now, the business looks bleak. And then I gathered our team after we had invested in all this culture, and I told them the same thing. I said, our business looks really bleak right now. It looks really dire. And so I want you to know that. And if you want to move on, you should move on. But I'm going to tell you this. I do not know how yet, but we are going to make this business really successful. And I'm going to be here to the last to make that successful. Because I felt there needed to be some constancy during a period of intense chaos. And remarkably, a huge percentage of the team said, we're with you. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if we get better jobs or not. And that's where the culture comes through.
Beautiful, beautiful. And they stayed with you. Doesn't really matter. Even if the ship sink, we are all going to sing together. But
We're
I'm
going to
willing
be
to
there.
trust.
Exactly.
I'm
And
willing to trust what the captain is saying, that he's going to be the last one, even if it sinks.
that's right. And that it's worthy to solve. And remarkable things, remarkable creativity. Struggles create incredible. Adversity creates remarkable creativity. And that's exactly what happened.
And I'm sure there are so many people who are coming to you to get advice, to have you as a mentor. And also, Raj, you have written this book called Digital Seekers.
Yes.
What was the idea behind writing that?
Yeah. So I've always wanted to write a book, and I would get a question quite regularly by lots of people, especially as digital has become the way by which people build businesses. What makes the great digital businesses succeed, and what makes the winners win and the losers lose? And so this book is, after answering that question verbally a number of times, this book is my answer to that question. And it turns out that for 20 years, we have heard about customers and customer centricity, and Amazon has trained us well to build great customer-centric experiences. But it turns out the real winners don't just build for the customer, they build for the seeker. And now, who exactly is the seeker? The seeker is the person behind the customer that has an underlying motivation that led to that purchase in the first place. So let's use a very simple example. I might be a customer of a plane ticket to go to the Caribbean islands. So I'm a potential customer of a plane ticket, but I'm a seeker of a memorable family vacation that my family will never forget. So if I am selling airline tickets, I can build for the customer and just make it easy for you to buy a plane ticket. Or I can build the kind of digital destination that creates memorable family vacations. And flight tickets will be one of the things that I offer. The second the first will get commoditized. And that's the core lesson of the book. And it's a cascading set of stories in industry after industry from my experience of who have employed these methods, what technology choices to make, what organization, what cultural values to put in place, what business models to undertake to make this seeker centricity real.
So what I'm listening is, rather than looking at a product as a product, right, or a commodity, you looked at the complete ecosystem and how best we can create an experience for the seeker.
That's right. And how to practically do that so that it's very much a practical for how to build such an experience to win big. And it's the story of what it took to build Uber and Airbnb and Netflix and all the many very successful digital destinations.
Just curious, as I'm just listening to you, Raj, what are the important pillars of creating that kind of a platform that can serve and create an experience for that seeker?
Yeah, what I think it starts with a recognition to understand who the seeker is and what they're seeking. So that's part one. Part two is to select the right technology to make it possible to do this at scale. And the third is to create the organizational constructs, team, business model, incentive structure, culture, et cetera, that create these seeker-centric experiences. And the book is really those three parts. How do you figure out the seeker and why are they important? What technology choices do you need to make to succeed? And then what do you do on the people side to actually be successful?
I've gone through the book and I found it very informative. And I wish if you had a program on that so that I can go through the program, sit with you, write it down, explore, introspect, write it down again, and then move to the next one. So what you're saying is The first one is how to identify your seekers. The second one is how to identify the right technology. And the third one is what you're talking about, the looking at the business construct, putting the right teams in place, putting the right culture in place, how to make sure we've got the right process and the systems in place.
Exactly.
Thank
Exactly.
you, Raj. Thank you so much for sharing that. Raj, as we're just coming to the end of this conversation, I'm just curious, if you were to give a piece of advice to your 21-year-old self, 22-year-old self, when you started your entrepreneurship journey, what advice would you offer?
Well, a couple, I guess. First, marry well. But beyond that, I think what I would say is if you want to be an entrepreneur, and this is maybe an advice for future entrepreneurs, then the key question to ask is, do you have it in your heart? A, and B, are you really ready? And I think those are the two important questions. It's not what the idea is, because the idea will change, the team will change, the concept will change. The first is, if you knew the probability of failure were high, might you still do it? And if you can answer genuinely yes, I think that's the first test. The second is, are you ready? And to me, the are you ready question actually can be tested, which is if you work in an organization or you're a student or you're reading something, imagine yourself as the founder or the CEO of that company. Think about all the decisions that are being made around you, the people that are being hired, the products that are being built, the choices that are being made about culture, the investments that are being approved and not approved. And then put yourself in the position of that leader and say, if I were them, what would I do?
Mm.
And if you can answer with confidence and you just have the instincts to feel strongly that you know what you would do, you're ready. If you don't, you're not ready.
Just wondering, Raj, the first question that's coming to me is there any appropriate age to get into entrepreneurship? The second one is it a learned behavior or is it something that you're born with? What's your response? Quick responses.
Don't think there's an appropriate age. Any age works. I think the scarce resource is energy, not money. That's important because you have to have energy to pull this off. And I think, is it a learned behavior? It can be learned. But the desire has to be there. The capabilities can be learned. Like anything else, you can learn a lot of things to be a very successful entrepreneur. And I think a lot of that can be learned. But you cannot learn the desire to be an entrepreneur.
Super, Raj. And here's the last question, Raj, for you. What do you want to be written on your epitaph?
Yeah, I think for me, it is about impact. That's what we said at the beginning of this conversation, entrepreneurship, creating something great that has great impact. So if it said he had impact, that's good enough for me.
Thank you so much, Raj. And I must tell you the kind of impact that you are creating with the work that you're doing. And every time I have spoken to you, it has been quite inspiring for me. So
I'm
at
really
least
glad.
in this conversation, you have impacted me. And I'm
Thank you.
genuinely grateful to you. Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much for
saying
your
that.
time.